I think that if we were to teach meditation and mindfulness skills generally, the skill of being able to learn how to manage your thinking, if we could teach that to kids, and you can teach that to kids as early as kindergarten, they take to it like fish to water. They understand it. They don't have all the crap in between that prevents them from getting it. If we could teach that, we would change the world in one generation.
Welcome to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner, a show about shifting our individual and collective beliefs on what is possible for the future of humanity. As our understanding of how our reality continues to shift, we are at a point of reunification between science and spirituality. What does the world look like when we break free from the generational trauma that has kept most humans playing small for thousands of years and step into our full power as the co-creators of this reality? I always ask that you keep an open mind with this podcast. Ask yourself what resonates with my truth at this time and what does not. Respect your intuition, but see if you can get through the whole show, because there might be that little nugget buried deep in the conversation that unlocks something for you. Welcome back, everyone, to Changing the Channel. I have a wonderful guest today. His name is Bob Martin, and he's had many twists and turns in his life, from a high-powered mob attorney down in Miami to a certified meditation teacher. He's helped hundreds redesign their thinking to create the life of their dreams. Bob's journey is anything but ordinary. He's currently a two-time published author and professor of wellness at Elon University, and joins me today to talk about the power of meditation. So welcome to the show, Bob. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, so I think, your journey has taken you through all these different steps, and it's kind of found you into meditation. So I'd kind of like to understand just a little bit of that journey into meditation, maybe a couple minutes of that, and then demystifying what meditation is. I think a lot of people's perception of what meditation is this kind of mix between spirituality and calmness of the mind and calming the body down. And I think a lot of people just get all twisted up in it. So what is meditation, and kind of what was your journey getting into meditation from high-powered attorney to today?
Yeah. So I was working in Miami and receiving a lot of referrals from some of the cartel and Italian mob in Miami for some time. And to tell you the truth, I was maybe hanging out with them a little too much. And those were the cocaine cowboy days, and those were the days of the discotheques and Chrome and Glass Miami, Miami Vice, Scarface, all that stuff. And it was really like that. And like I say, I may have been hanging out with them a little too much. And professionally, I was doing phenomenally. Privately and personally, my life was kind of spiraling downwards. And I was seeing a therapist, and I came to a major decision to make in my life. I asked my therapist about it. He started throwing coins, which surprised me, and making calculations on paper and drawing lines on the paper. Finally, he came up with the number and opened up a book to that chapter number and showed me the title, which was Retreat. And you can imagine, I'm paying this guy $65 an hour to be my therapist, right? And he's throwing coins like a soothsayer. I have no idea what's going on. I curse him out, I stomp out, but it was the right advice. And I pulled back and I stopped and I said, what am I doing? And it wasn't the right thing. I went back and I asked him, what was that all about? Turned out that my therapist was the English language editor and disciple of a 72nd generation Taoist master from the Shaolin Temple. You think about that, 72nd generations, I kind of calculated that out. It's 1,400 years of handing down wisdom from father to son to father to son. And so Master Watching Ni was someone who I met and who I studied under. And I studied Taoism, and I had come from a non-theist family. I didn't have any religious or spiritual background, so I was completely new to it. Took to it like a fish to water. I loved Master Ni. just an amazing individual. And we practice many Taoist practices, from the physical practices like Tai Chi and Kung Fu and Qigong, to the intuitive practices like the I Ching and the Tao Te Ching and things like that. And I learned a lot underneath him. Um, but I will say this, that Taoism is much more contemplative than it is meditative. So
Mm.
I really didn't engage in meditation, but well, let's just say I ran into a little conflict of interest with my mob client. So I moved to North Carolina, and
Huh.
when I got to North Carolina, there weren't a lot of Taoists, and so I started attending Buddhist temples, and Buddhism is a meditative practice. So
Mm.
I was engaged with meditation. Now we're starting about 1988, 1990. So we're talking 3 decades now. And I started meditating. And like most folks, there were fits and starts. And I would do it for a little while and then I'd stop. And I'd do it for a little while and then I'd stop and I'd get guilty and be judgmental and et cetera, et cetera. And I had that experience um, until I got a coach. And the coach, helped me over those tough points. And finally, I developed a consistent practice. And so then some of the folks that, the powers that be in that world reached out and they said, we'd like you to engage in teacher training. And so from the classical teacher training is pretty intense. 2 years, 30 minutes a day, sessions every week. Some of the best meditators, John Kabat-Zinn, Jack Kornfield, Susan Salzberg, these were my teachers. And after 2 years, we had to undergo, quite a interesting process of retreats and practices. Anyway, I was certified. And then I came out of that, thought that I was going to change the world, and found out that talking about meditation is a pretty hard conversation, you know? So, like, what you said about demystifying is interesting, because the moment you say something about meditation, the most common response that I ever get is, oh, yeah, yeah, meditation. That's what I really need. I really need to do that, but I could never do it, because the moment I sit down, my mind goes crazy and I think about everything and I can't stop my thoughts, and it's just not for me. And that's the most common response that you get. And so thank you so much for having a platform like this where folks like me can come on and say, it's not really, you are meditating when you think you're not. You,
Thank you again for listening to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner. If you enjoyed the show, please follow the podcast, hit the bell to know when a new show comes out, share with a friend, and rate us on whatever platform you're tuning in from. It helps get these messages out to more people to create the collective shift in reality we are here to experience. Make sure you interact with the Q&A and poll sections of the show so I can continue to provide content you enjoy. Finally, check out my website in the show notes to become a VIP of Changing the Channel and join the shift that is happening. The journey to finding myself started with a shift in how I viewed my health. That is why I am proud to partner with Purium, the transformation company. What if you could support your health with a system designed for today's challenges? Purium is more than a supplement company. It's a solution for regenerative health. Their whole food products include the only clinically proven glyphosate detox, helping you eliminate the toxic buildup caused by modern farming. Pair that with Beyond Organic superfoods and the most efficient source of protein on the planet, and you've got a powerhouse combination to build muscle, improve digestion, and fuel your energy levels, all while promoting deeper sleep. Plus, Purium is mission-driven with planetary health in mind. They're proud to lead the way in a plastic-free movement using biodegradable packaging as much as possible. True health freedom starts here. Experience the power of this regenerative healing system for yourself and witness your own transformation take place. You get 60 days to try it, and if you truly don't feel any benefit, you get fully refunded. I have personally been using the daily Core Forward products and have noticed an increase in my energy and the depth of my sleep. Use the link in the descriptions to get started today and receive at least $50 off your first order over $75. Right.
This idea that your mind goes crazy is what meditation is. The only difference is that now we're noticing it instead of just having it happen kind of in default mode where blah, 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 and I should have done this yesterday and I got to do this tomorrow. And did I leave the stove on? And I can't believe that guy said this to me. And all that as thoughts go through our heads, which are kind of automatic and they're like default. But it's not the same as when you pay attention. If I give a little example, so let's say you're driving along and you're in default mode. The car knows where you're going. You already know. You don't have to think about where you're going. You're going to turn right here, turn left there. So you're thinking about all this stuff, and you're just in default mode. And then another car gets a little bit too close to your car, and all of a sudden you pay attention. It's like you wake up and you go, what's happening? And you're fully attentive. Okay? So that's the difference between being mindful and being in default. Now, there's nothing wrong with being in default. I've been practicing for 20 years, and I would not ever want to be mindful all the time. It's too much. It's nice just to let your brain go on and get from here to there and automatically, and there's nothing, that's fine. But to have the additional capacity to be attentive when you want to be attentive is just helpful. So it's not about quieting the mind. It's not about calming the mind or relaxing the body. Although I have to say, relaxation is an art and a skill in itself. But that's not meditation. Meditation is really more about learning the skills that help you manage your thinking. It's not about quieting your thinking. It's about managing your thinking. It's about noticing the thoughts that are not helpful, but not resisting them, allowing them. It's the only way to notice them. You allow them to happen, and you begin to learn the skill of watching your thought and not being in your thoughts.
Right.
A metaphor that I like to use is this one. We all have a sensation, a feeling that there is a stream of consciousness that flows through our mind. We can get spiritual about it, or we can get scientific and say it's a bunch of electrical connections that are firing, or we can say that it's, the universal intelligence. Above my pay grade. Don't worry about that. Who knows the answer to that? But we do have a sensation that there is this flow of consciousness that goes through it. And on that consciousness, there are individual thoughts. And I kind of think of it like a river that's flowing, and there are sticks and twigs on the river. And it's like in our normal non-meditative life, it's like we ride on one of those leaves, and however the river happens to be is what we're experiencing life to be. So if the river's calm, things are good. Then there's white water. Then there are waterfalls. And all of those are different experiences that we have in life, and we don't have a lot of say over that when we're riding on the leaf. What meditation teaches us to do and gives us the skill of being able to do is, even as we're riding on the leaf, to also kind of get up on the bank of the river and watch ourselves riding on the leaf. And from the place where you're riding on the leaf, life is a roller coaster, and that's never going to go away. But from the place where you're up on the bank watching, there's a certain sense of stability and calm there. And so the calm and the peace and the stability that everybody talks about with meditation is not because life ceases to be a roller coaster. but because you can become more familiar with that place where you're watching the roller coaster and not hooked by it.
Right.
And that's where the peace and stability comes from.
Yeah, being outside that roller coaster, even though you're a fraction of you is
Right.
experiencing it, right?
Yeah, it sounds weird, doesn't it? Like you're split into two personalities, but once you experience it, it just feels normal.
Right. And that's the I think that's the hardest part about getting people into meditation is because they've never experienced a third person perspective of their life. And,
Hmm. Hmm.
that that experience that, it's almost like that's the awakening process is when you have that experience of a third person perspective of your life and you're like, "Oh, wow, that feels so much better than being in the up and the down and the leaf hitting rocks and twigs and all of that." To get that feeling and then to try to convey that to other people and, this is how you're going to feel when you experience this is kind of the difficult part of having that meditation practice and becoming fluent in meditation or even, I like that you said there's a difference between meditation and relaxation because that's something that a lot of people definitely don't realize. They think, oh, well, I'm sitting quietly in a chair, I'm very relaxed. But are you observing your thoughts or are you still in your thoughts? Are you still your
Right,
thoughts?
right, right.
Um, I-
A lot of people, I've come to, a lot of people will respond if you're explaining this, and they'll say something which I've just recently begin to understand. They say, "Oh, I do that all the time. I'm always thinking about my thinking. I'm always like evaluating my thinking." And yes and no. It's that's that's not it's a little bit different because what is happening, what they're experiencing as, "Oh, I do that all the time," is a series of judgments about
mm,
themselves that they have no say in. It's like people describe it as that committee in my head, the
mhm.
committee that's always commenting on everything that I'm doing. And still, there's no separation from that. You're not up on the bank watching the committee in your head. And
Right.
it's still the committee is still part of the default mode. And that is that's a troubling place to be because it's a lot of science tells us that the majority of self-talk is negative. And you mentioned about meditating, and often there are guided meditations, and many times in the guided meditations we throw out affirmations that are positive, and they make a difference. They really do. Saying something over and over, and um, and so do constant negative self-talk. The brain science tells us so.
Right. And that's the whole I think that's a part of that default mode network that is kind of filtering out everything except for what it deems necessary for most of the time your survival. So if
Hmm.
your attention, if your focus is on all of the negative things, that default mode network, the reticular activating system, they're going to bring you information that's going to verify what you believe. Like it's
Exactly.
only going to allow the information that's verifying what you're saying and believing on a daily basis into your awareness. And the 99.5% of reality that's happening outside of that awareness is just going to be in the subconscious mind and you're going to have no say over what is actually happening to you. But if you
Right, right.
focus that energy, if you focus that intent on whether it's positive or negative, that's when things start to magically appear. And I think a lot of people really get caught up in that sense of awe, and they turn it into, well, this has to be an act of God, or this has to be the universe telling me. And really, it's just you noticing something that has always been there. It's always been there, but you're just now aware of it. You're more aware
Hmm.
of it.
Are you seeking a path to inner peace and personal transformation?
Check out my website where I offer free weekly guided meditations designed to help you reconnect with your inner self and navigate your day with mindfulness. Whether you're new to meditation or looking to deepen your practice, our sessions provide a supportive space for growth. Join our community today and start your journey towards a more balanced and conscious life. Visit joegarner.net and sign up for our free weekly meditation. Find the link in the show notes.
Yeah, we've all had that experience when we ever get a new car, or at least a new to me car.
Mhm.
And let's say you get a Chevrolet Malibu, and all of a sudden, there's everywhere. You see Chevrolet Malibus everywhere all of a sudden. Now, you never saw one or noticed one before, but now you're seeing them everywhere. And that's because when you got the Chevrolet Malibu, you immediately taught your brain that Chevrolet Malibus are important to me.
Mm.
And so, as your brain scans the environment, whenever it sees anything that it knows is important to you, it sends it up to your consciousness. Like you say, we only 99% of the stuff, the intake we take, is filtered out. Only the important stuff we become conscious of. And so, if we have a concept that I'm not good enough, then anything that happens in the environment that supports that is going to come into our consciousness, and we're going to constantly be reinforcing whatever our beliefs are. And that's why in jury trials, you have 12 people who sit in the same place, hear the same evidence from the same people, hear the same things. They all see exactly the same stuff. Then they go back in and they argue forever over what they saw, because different people were conscious of different points of it. And hopefully, the idea of the system is between all 12 of them, they'll eventually put the whole story together and have
Mm.
the whole story. That's hopefully the concept, of the idea. But it's interesting how people see different things and create their own reality based on what their filters allow to reach their consciousness.
Exactly. That's a huge theme of this show is that, you're essentially creating your own reality by
Mhm.
focusing your intention, by tuning into a specific channel. If that channel is you're very successful and you have lots of friends and romantic partnership and all of this, well, that's the channel that you're going to experience. That's the channel that's going to manifest into your world. If you're focused on a channel where everything falls apart and things aren't happening the way that they need to be happening, well, that's what you're going to also kind of manifest into your experience. Um, and it's you. I think the key is realizing that you are in control of the channel. Like you have the clicker at your disposal. If you're able to calm down, you can slow down enough to take that viewpoint from the bank of the river, which is where you have control of the channel, versus when you're on that leaf, you have far less control of how you are experiencing
Mhm.
the reality that you're experiencing. Now,
Absolutely. Well
I think
said.
it's Thank you. Yeah. I think it's really cool that you have taken what you've learned and you've brought it. Now you're bringing it into kind of I believe you teach a little bit more on the business end at Elon as well as mindfulness as a course. So, I think your idea is that mindfulness has an ability to possibly transform what we call our working experience, or going into the workplace with mindfulness can kind of transform that workplace. So maybe I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that experience or what your ideas are around the power of mindfulness in the workplace in 2020. It'll be 2025 when this comes out. So,
Yeah, right. So it makes me think of something Master Nee once said to us. We said, well, how do we get, how do we get and learn mastery? Because he was a master, but one of the things that he always spoke about was having mastery of life,
mm,
mastery in life. And he said, "Oh, it's really quite simple," he said. He said, "All that you need to do is become completely aware of all of the forces that are acting within you. Then become completely aware and tuned into all of the forces that are acting on the other. Then become completely aware and conscious of all of the forces that are acting in the environment around you. And then finally, all you need to do is take away all the boundaries so that it's just one." And we all cracked up laughing. Simple, yeah, right? You could spend a life
Easy.
trying to do that, yeah. So, and he chuckled away, laughed, and as he always did, he would finish, he would get up, he would chuckle, and he would kind of drift away.
Right.
So, but I think he was pointing to is that you you can develop a sensitivity. The training in meditation, the skill building in meditation, it is a very the basic breath awareness meditation is a very simple instruction. You know, form the intention to put your attention on your breath. And very shortly, your mind will wander off and you'll go into default mode and you'll have thought trains. But because you formed the intention, your mind will remind you that your intention was to put your attention on the breath. You'll get this little feeling of startle, like, oh, like when you know that you're not listening to somebody, you go, oh, I'm not listening anymore. Oh, I'm not paying attention to my breath, which will be followed by a whole series of judgments. I'm doing it wrong. I failed. I couldn't do it. And then after you run out of judgments, then you get to the point where you say, okay, let me go back and begin again. And then your mind wanders again and you wake up and you have your judgments and you begin again. And then your mind wanders and you wake up and you have your judgments and you begin again. And by doing this in a repetitive process, you start to really get familiar with the judgments themselves. They become something other than something that's in control of you. It becomes something that you actually develop the skill of noticing. And this is how you build the skill of getting up on the bank of the river, because every time we do this, we step back from our thoughts a little bit, and then we step back a little more, and we step back a little more. And inside of 10 minutes a day for 2 weeks of practice, you'll get it. You'll have it. It's not like you have to practice for, years and years. If you just practice this simple instruction inside of a couple of weeks, you'll get it. And then it's just nothing but more skill building after that. And so what Master Nee was pointing to is that as you begin to notice your judgments and your judgmental thinking, you begin to notice your default thinking, and you begin to notice your planning thinking, and you begin to notice your reminiscing, and you begin to notice all these different types of thinking that you do from this place where you become more familiar with the person up on the bank. Now, if we were being spiritual, we'd say you're getting back in touch with your soul. If we're being psychological, we would say you're getting back in touch with your subconscious.
Right.
However you want to phrase it, but you are getting back in touch with a deeper, more authentic you, which is able to become aware of the forces that are working within you. And as you become more aware of the forces that are working within you, the thoughts and the judgments and the emotions and the body sensations, you become more familiar, reconnected to that. You begin to recognize it more easily in others. And you begin to recognize the forces that society around you imposes on you. And the conditioning starts to break up. And you start to develop a freedom. And it's in that freedom where you become much more present. And that's what I think he was hinting at when he said this. So now apply that to a manager. apply it to a manager who has now developed these skills of understanding what's going on inside him, so that as somebody becomes frustrating and annoying, rather than allowing that frustration and annoyance to build, he recognizes the body sensations that are there. He recognizes the thoughts that come with it. He's able to deconstruct it, and he's able to then respond to the annoying behavior in a way that's going to be more helpful, because every time he's done it in the past, he's had the ability to look at it and say, was that helpful or not helpful? And then
Mm.
adjust his behaviors the next time. So he is in a way, he is becoming his own supervisor. Uh,
Right.
his own, I should rephrase that, his own kind and gentle and helpful supervisor, because he
Mhm.
has learned to understand his judgmentalness and diffuse it. You know,
Yeah, and I think having a bunch of, empathic people in business, especially in organizations closer or nearer to the top, is such a helpful pathway for a business. It's,
mm,
if you can get your managers to be able to, again, zoom out, see themselves and see others from that perspective from the riverbank, then how the organization operates begins to shift. It goes from, kind of like the top down approach to a little bit more of a distributed network of people that are able to do what they need to do, but not have to be told every single time, this is what I need you to do. And then, you've got the kind of, when they don't do what they need to do, there's like the reprimanding. If you have that only perspective that you're just on that leaf floating down, when people disappoint you, you have typically a reaction to that. It's more of
mm-hmm,
a reaction than a response of, hey, I understand why you did it this way, but let's try to do it this way. It's like, why in the world did you do it that way? This is the way that I've been telling you to do it. And the difference between that and a top down managerial approach certainly has a major difference in the outcome
sure,
of every aspect of the business.
sure,
So
and that,
from
mhm. And that
yeah, from
doesn't
your
mean
perspective.
that doesn't mean there aren't times that call for forceful talk. There aren't times that cause for you to raise your voice. There are times, when decisive action needs to be taken, clearly. But you have a tendency to recognize those times and use them judiciously.
Right. Right. Is that kind of the only aspect that you see mindfulness being useful in business? Like when you're teaching your classes, what are you sharing with students how they can be more mindful leaders in an organization, their own organization, or just within, their families?
So I had one student recently. Now, in my class at the university, is not a required course. It's an elective, clearly. So, people self-select to take it, and you would assume that if somebody decides they want to take a course in meditation, that they want the benefits from it. So this one young lady took the course, and the way that I teach is this system that was developed at Duke University. It was an interdisciplinary, years-long study. They came up with an extremely effective and efficient way of teaching meditation that you can accomplish in a 5-week period, with 1 hour meeting, 1 hour a week, and practicing 10 minutes a day, which
Hmm.
fits the Western concept of what a course should be. I mean, if you say to somebody, "Oh, I want you to sit for 30 minutes a day for 2 years," you're going to go, "Yeah, right." That ain't
Right.
happening. But so I used this course developed at Duke, and it asks the students they're given a digital infrastructure, an app, and they're asked to practice 10 minutes a day and log their reflection. Every single day, that reflection comes to my dashboard, and every single day I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I sit down with my 15 student logs, and I read them and I respond to them with coaching every single day. And that's what makes this course effective and efficient, because they're getting little tiny adjustments to their methodology every day. And so, 35 coaching sessions in a 4-week period is the equivalent of 5 months or 6 months seeing somebody once a week. So it's really effective. Anyway, so I noticed that she wasn't engaging. She wasn't doing her logs and the like. And so I asked her to stay after school class. And I said, not being judgmental here. It's an elective. You're certainly free to do whatever you want, but you chose to take the class. So I'm sure you want the benefits, and I'm sure you understand that you can't go to the gym and be taught how the machine works. You got to get on the machine and work it.
Mm.
I'm sure you understand that. So, what's going on? So we went from I don't understand. I always seem to want to do things and then I don't do them, to I seem to get in my own way. And as we, chatted back and forth, now I am a therapist, but not as a meditation teacher. I'm not a therapist. I'm a meditation teacher. And
Right.
so, just asking her questions about what are the thinkings and where do you feel it and blah, blah. Finally, the floodgates broke open and she started sobbing and saying, I just don't feel I deserve to be happy.
Mm.
That's not an uncommon feeling among folks, and it is a huge obstacle to people's having a joyful life. So, how do you deal with that as a meditation teacher? So, the first thing I asked her was, where do you feel this in your body? What are the body sensations? Because, now we're talking about being in the present. If you tell me, I feel like, she said, I feel like there's a throbbing here. And she pointed to her upper left chest. But it's not throbbing, but I feel like it's throbbing. Well, it was her sensation. It feels like it's swelling. I said, where else do you feel it? So we located all of the physical sensations. And then I asked her, what are the thoughts that you're having? So we started to identify the actual words that she was using in her thinking. And by the time we were 10 minutes into this idea of well, what are you saying? What are the words? What are the feelings? Where do you feel it? She had calmed down. And then we started talking about the fact that emotions are made up of physical sensations combined with thoughts. And if she could deconstruct these powerful emotions she had and just remind her, where am I feeling this in my body? Is it in my cheeks? Is it a warmth? Is it in where is it? And what are the exact thoughts? That process of becoming mindful of what was happening to you gave you the ability to recognize it as not as powerful, to deconstruct it. And then once you can deconstruct it and disempower it, you have the ability to experience it in a way that you can allow it to happen instead of resisting it, because whatever you resist persists.
Right.
And when what you can allow with will let you be. And by the end of the class, 3 weeks later, she was practicing every day.
Mm.
So that's the power that this practice has.
Yeah, yeah. And I really like that you keep it very simple, 10 minutes a day, pretty much every day. And like you said, within a month, and that's what I tell my students as well. Within a month, you can be meditating at a pretty at least above average level. Most
Mm-hmm.
humans are not meditating at that level, and it only takes a month to get to that
Mm-hmm.
point. And
Mm-hmm.
then what you do with it after that, that is the real power. Like, that's when you start working with your intuition and your ability to not only feel what is happening in the present, but be able to feel potential futures. What are different futures that are possible to you based on what you have going on right now? And
Mm-hmm.
that's really tuning into your intuition. So
Right,
we
right,
were
right.
we were talking about that, you grew up in this Taoist perspective, and they speak a lot about intuitive abilities in the Taoist practice. So maybe we can get a little bit more into what does that mean to you? What do the Taoists talk about? And then what's your experience as far as being able to tune into your own intuition, to be able to tune into that kind of guiding voice that is again always there, but is just filtered out for most people. That that the at least that's my belief that everyone is intuitive, that everybody has this ability to tune into their intuition, but it's filtered out through default mode network, reticular activating system, all these other filters. And until you set the intention to be intuitive, you'll continue to have that experience where it's just not a part of your reality.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Taoism is very energy oriented. The whole yin yang thing is the yin energy and the yang energy. And sometimes they say the yang is masculine, the yin is feminine, the yang is positive, the yin is negative, the yang is daytime, the yin is nighttime. And in matter of fact, that symbol, of the yin yang, the Tai Chi with the little white dot inside of the black and the black inside of the white. Well, that whole symbol means that the white dot is the seed of yang inside of yin, and it will grow and it will take over yin. And the yang will take over yin, and the yin will take over yang, which is just a symbol that day turns to night and night turns to day. But what most human beings don't realize, and what Taoism teaches, is that that doesn't only go for natural cycles, it also goes for good times and bad times, hard times and easy times. Because if you look back at your life, there have never been a hard time that has lasted your entire life. It has always become easier, and easier times have always led to harder times. And that cycling is energetic in Taoist thinking. And yin and yang, although they represent positive and negative, it's not positive and negative like good and bad. It's positive and negative like the poles of a battery.
Right.
You wouldn't say the negative pole of a battery is the bad pole. It's just the opposite pole so that you can have a flow of energy. And it is that flow of energy that Taoists study very deeply. So the practice that Master Ni taught us, and one of the main practices of Taoism, is called the I Ching, which it means the classical book of changes. And it defines, it is the archetypical going with the flow. That's what Taoism ultimately, if you want to get it down to one sentence, Taoism is about going with the flow. But it's not about going with the flow like lolly-da-di-da, I'm going to take my hands off the wheel and just, float down the river. Because the river has rocks, and the river has branches, and the river has things that you're going to run ashore, and sandbars, and you still have to navigate the boat. But the idea is navigate the boat with the least amount of energy possible under the circumstances, aligning yourself with the energy that's there appropriately so that you use less effort but become more effective and more efficient. And you want to talk about business. If you could run a business with the least amount of effort and have the most amount of effectiveness and efficiency, you would be a supreme manager, right? And
Right.
that's what Master Ni defined as mastery. When you can understand the energy that's around you at the time and then align yourself with it. So if you're out in the ocean and you want to get to shore, what the Taoist would do is when the tide is moving towards the shore, they would expend maximum energy. Then when it turns around and it's going against us, they wouldn't continue to fight it. They would just use the littlest amount of energy necessary to hold still. Wait, be patient, understand patience, understand that the cycle will change, and when it changes, be prepared to put out maximum energy. and then hold, and maximum energy, and then hold. That's why you see people that practice Tai Chi. They're always moving forward and moving back because the universe and everything cycles. And so we have to learn patience. We have to learn appropriateness. So what Taoism teaches, it teaches that there is a time for waiting. There's a time for advancing, a time for retreating, as George showed me in the book, Retreat. There's a time for punching through. There's a time for calculation. There's a time for planning. So if you could recognize that nobody's listening to me right now, then the smart thing to do would be to stop talking. But use the time to put your ideas together more succinctly so that when somebody turns to you and say, now, what was it that you wanted to say? You're ready to speak into their listening. So you
Right.
hold and be ready to advance, and hold and be ready to advance. So, so in the way that the I Ching is practiced, and Carl Jung wrote several treatises on the I Ching, where he figured out why it works and what happens. And as my therapist did, you throw coins. You ask a question like, what do I need to know about the upcoming interview? What do I need to know about today's podcast? What do I need to know about my life? What do I need to know about today? And then you ask this question with the intention of wanting to be shown the answer. And at that point, you start to do mathematical things and throw coins and count heads and tails and twos and threes and add them up and create lines and young yins and young yangs, and you create what's called a hexagram. This ties up your rational, verbal side of your brain, and it allows your intuition to work on the question you posed.
Hmm.
Then, when you get the numbers that are resulting in it, you go to the book and you open it up to those chapters and you start reading. And what happens at this point is that you already know the answer intuitively. The only thing that we need to do is create a bridge that gets it over to the verbal part of your mind so that you can have it in your consciousness, so you can be aware of what the answer was, so that you can more clearly notice the energies and how you're responding to it within the context of the time that's indicated. It gives you a heightened sense of what's going on. But
Hmm.
it is your intuition that selects, like you said, the selective consciousness. Your intuition selects the words and the phrases within the reading that it wants your verbal mind to get.
Hmm.
And so it really isn't an oracle or anything magical or anything like that. It is just a very, very wide book of truths and wisdoms that allow you to create that bridge between your two brains. And in doing so, you empower your intuitive side so that eventually you get to the point where you just feel this is
Mhm.
not a time for me to move forward. You just feel it intuitively. It comes up like hunches, but your hunches become more and more accurate. You know, it's
Right.
like if I have 8 things I need to do today, and I'm relying totally on my rational brain, I might plot them out by going to 1, then 4, then 5, then 3. But if I allow my intuitive side will figure out the most efficient way for me to do it. And if I allow it to speak to me, I'll find that I save time. Oh, that's interesting. A new study just came out that there's actually an ROI on meditation,
Hmm.
a return on investment. It's really cool. In time,
That's
they they find that if you take a 15 minutes in the morning, and whether you meditate or you just relax or you just go out and watch the birds, but you take 15 minutes for your nonverbal mind to slow down and allow your intuitive mind to just feel, that you will have better decisions during the day, and that you'll get back between 300 to 450% of the time you invested. So you'll get back
Wow.
45 minutes to an hour and a half in saved time based on better and more efficient decisions that you make during the day.
That's a huge ROI for, 15 minutes of time every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, really.
I love that. And I love that how you kind of relate and make this kind of woo-woo idea. I know a lot of people talk about your horoscopes and pulling cards and all of these things. And what I think is such a powerful use of those is if, like you said, if you can turn off that rational thinking mind. So like when somebody pulls a card and it's like, oh, the death card, I'm going to die tomorrow. It's like, no, no, that's not what that means. Like, let go of that feeling and just see what feelings come up from the death card. Is it a death of a small part of you? Is it a death of a habit that you want to get rid of? Like, what does the death card mean to that intuitive ability or that nonverbal part of your brain, which it's always going to happen. And that's the key, I think, for people to understand is that
Hmm. Hmm.
your
Yes,
mind,
yes.
your specific mind is going to latch on to whatever it wants to or needs to help convey to you what it needs to or wants to. And I always say that that your intuition is a relationship with a mentor. So
I
if
love
you
that.
were a if you were a mentor and you gave out information to your mentee and they didn't listen to a single word of it and you did that for 6 months, chances are by the end of that 6 months, as the mentor, you're going to just stop giving information to that person. They're just not paying attention to it, right?
Right.
So 10 years down the line, when you say, I want to get my intuition back, I want to be more intuitive, well, you got to build that trust back with your mentor. That mentor is not going to say, oh, you're ready to go. Here's all the information that you need. You got to start small. You got to build that relationship. Um, and then continue to listen and trust in the guidance that it is giving you. Because if you don't actually take the information that your intuition is sharing with you and act upon it, or at least make an attempt to act upon it, then it's just wasting its energy. And again, whether you conceptualize that as something inside the mind, as a portion of the mind, or outside of the mind as your soul or your guidance or your guides or the universe or God or whatever you're envisioning, that it too is trying to maximize efficiency. So it's not going to pour all its efforts into somebody or something that is just not listening. There's no fruit coming from that exchange of energy. It's not reciprocated
Hmm.
back. So it's going to, cease and desist with all of the communication that you have with it. And as you are trying to build that back, you gotta build these practices and processes that get you back in tune with your intuition, so that, like you said, at some point you don't need to go to the stars to see what these next decisions need to be. You actually feel it inside of you. You can feel how your intuition is speaking to you, how your guidance is speaking to you, and at that point, then once you have that discernment, and that's kind of a big key when you're talking about intuition, is
Hmm.
discernment, not from, discernment from the rational versus the non-rational side of your brains. Then you can really start making these decisions quickly. You can start, it's basically exponential how fast you can start uh, uh, building and taking advantage of these practices.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's so true. And, brain science supports all of that, because that neuroplasticity that there's so much research being done on, where neurons that fire together wire together. And we know that it's how habits of, repetitive actions and practice on a regular basis, the consistency causes neural pathways to form. And, when those neural pathways are thin, it's kind of like the filament in a light bulb. There's a lot of resistance, and
Mhm.
the feeling of that resistance, what it feels like, how we perceive it, is oh, I don't like to think about that, or that's hard for me, or I don't like math, or I'm not good at. That's what it feels like. But as we thicken that neural pathway, it becomes more like a cable where the electricity flows through it easily. And what that feels like is, oh, that's easy for me, or I can do that, or I'm good at that. That's what it
Mm.
feels like. And uh, people tend to think that we only build those neural pathways on our rational side. But you're right. We build that intuitively as well. The more you use it, the easier it is to use. And, if you don't use it, you lose it.
Right.
So,
Yeah, they're very, I think from a neuroplasticity standpoint, yeah, it's very
mhm.
clear that if you don't use it, you lose it, that your neurons are separating from each other. If they're, I think it's within typically 6 months is kind of the saying is that, within 6 months, if it hasn't fired, it is detached already. And yeah, I think it's fascinating that the science is actually catching up with these, Taoism, which has been around for thousands of years, that these people back then like had this knowledge and wisdom all the way back then. So as we're kind of coming into the end of the show, this has been an amazing conversation. I really love getting into the science and the understanding of what meditation is, what it isn't. I kind of ask every guest what over the next couple of years, as we progress, as it does seem like mindfulness, meditation, it making its entrance into and really starting to ingrain itself into Western culture, Western society. What does the world start to look like if people are if there's a large majority of people that are living life with an awareness of that, view from the bank of the river versus on the leaf of the river, what does that world start to look like for you? And what are you seeing that you are hopeful for, that is getting you really excited for the future of humanity? And maybe a little bit of what, the potentials that things could go wrong.
yeah. I do some pro bono work with kids coming out of the foster and juvenile justice system. And one of them said in group, Mr. Martin, the other day I was out on the playground and Johnny pushed me down and I really wanted to get up and hit him. But I went over to the bench and I did my breathing. And then I thought
Mm.
that if I went back and if I hit him, then we would never be friends. And I think that answers the question. Just take that times 1,000. I think that if we were to teach meditation and mindfulness skills generally, the skill of being able to learn how to manage your thinking, if we could teach that to kids, and you can teach that to kids as early as kindergarten, they take to it like fish to water. They understand it. They don't have all the crap in between that prevents them from getting it. If we could teach that, we would change the world in one generation.
Mm.
Now, whether or not the whether or not the power brokers want us to become more self-aware, whether they want us to be educated, whether they want us to gain in wisdom, whether they want us to tear ourselves away from hours and hours and hours vegetating on the couch in front of a television and being brainwashed, that's a political question that is outside of my control. All we can ever do, as someone once said, is just take care of our little corner of the world.
Right. Wise words.
Mm-hmm.
Just worry about what you can control and let go of everything else, because it's a very stoic perspective that there's no need to worry about anything that is out of your control. So just focus on what you are in control of, and typically for most people you are in control of yourself, and that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty much where it stops.
Right.
So you control how you respond, you control how you react, you control how you perceive the things that are happening in the world. And in doing so, you change the channel, you change how your perceiving what is actually happening, and that changes the outcome of what actually happens in your reality.
True.
So, Bob, this has been a wonderful conversation. For anyone who is interested in just learning a little bit more about you, where can I send them? Where can I direct them towards?
Okay. So I have written a couple of little downloadable free ebooks. One of them's called What is Meditation and What Is It Not? And the other is called 25 Tips and Tricks from Around the Internet to De-Stress that you can learn in 5 minutes or less.
Mm.
So you can go to my website and download those for free. I've also got 56 gigabytes of downloadable information and resources on meditation, mindfulness. I've got guided meditations there that can be downloaded. It's all at awiseandhappylife.com. awiseandhappylife.com.
Beautiful. I'll make sure I link that in the show notes for everyone to check out at the bottom. Bob, this has been wonderful. I really appreciate you coming on today, sharing your wisdom, sharing your journey. And I think there's so much that people can take away from this, especially those who have no idea what meditation is and think there's no way I could ever meditate. 10 minutes a day, 1 month, you're good to go. You're back into it and your mind is already starting to calm. So thanks again and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you again for listening to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner. If you enjoyed the show, please follow the podcast, hit the bell to know when a new show comes out, share with a friend, and rate us on whatever platform you're tuning in from. It helps get these messages out to more people to create the collective shift in reality we are here to experience. Make sure you interact with the Q&A and poll sections of the show so I can continue to provide content you enjoy. Finally, check out my website in the show notes to become a VIP of Changing the Channel and join the shift that is happening.